Hi guys, Harbs here. Today we're going to be talking about crime in the city of Baldur's Gate, because there is a lot of it.
I serve the flaming fist!
But it isn't quite as simple as one might think. Corruption infiltrates almost every part of daily life, and the guild acts as a puppet master over most of the criminals and many of the politicians in the city. Therefore, navigating its political world could prove just as dangerous as the city's many dark alleys. I'd just like to say a big thank you to a new patron called Soral, as well as two new members of the channel, Hunted Dreams and B. Lee. As always, it's much appreciated. Okay, let's go.
Stop right there, criminal scum! I am the law!
I will shove my arm up your ass and work your mouth like a puppet.
Murder, murder, murder!
Crime. It's bad, and Baldur's Gate is full of it. It's the largest city on the Sword Coast and one of the most prosperous merchant cities in the area, meaning that all types of people are invited in by the city's potential for opportunity, trade and tolerance. Yes, tolerance. Baldur's Gate would historically accept near enough anyone, from the destitute to the wealthy. Baldur's Gate is home to just about any type of individual, where citizenship was only bought for a couple of silver pieces, and whilst humans were the most dominant in the city, just about anyone could be found there, including races like ogres and trolls. After the Spell Plague, many people flocked to the city for a sense of security, as did Elturians more recently in Descent into Avernus, after their own city was pulled into the depths of hell. In reality, there is little security to be found here, and one's experience can largely depend on how lucky they get, with a corrupt mercenary force known as the Flaming Fist stretched to keep order, becoming more oppressive by the day since Elturel's fall, and then the guild that has many politicians in their pocket. The city can be a difficult place to navigate without help. I've linked a video down below on the proper origins of Baldur's Gate, but the city grew from a pirate's port to a farmer's fort, and then finally into a sprawling metropolis. So its pirate origins are poetically linked to its current era of being a roguish and corrupt city-state. Awash with crime and yet at the same time being a draw for heroes, having certain freedoms and tolerances that other cities on the Sword Coast just don't have. What's interesting is how authors have changed their description of Baldur's Gate throughout the years. Back in Volor's Guide to the Sword Coast in 1994, the following is written. Baldur's Gate is a tolerant but well-policed city of merchants, and quiet business as usual is the general order of each day. Baldur's Gate, Burdusk, Neverwinter and Silvery Moon are probably the safest settlements in all Western Faerûn. Contrast that description with Descent into Avernus. Today, its foggy streets run red with the blood of unfortunates who fall prey to evil opportunists, many of whom count themselves as nobles, traders, pirates and assassins. An army of mercenary soldiers called the Flaming Fist keeps order in the city, and these soldiers answer to Grand Duke Ulder Ravengard. The members of the Flaming Fist don't care about justice, they crave power and coin, nothing else. But despite the Fist's reputation for cruelty, the Grand Duke is widely regarded as an honourable and reasonable man. We will be focusing on how the city is in modern times, a larger city affected not only by a growing criminal network, but also by a sinister darkness that permeates every aspect of the city. The Guild is the overarching criminal organisation in Baldur's Gate. That's not to say that there aren't criminals that operate outside of this organisation, but the Guild acts as the most powerful and connected organisation in the city. Before the Guild, there were various thieves' guilds that all seemingly dissipated around about the end of the 14th century. We can come across one of these thieves' guilds in the first Baldur's Gate game, led by Alatos Ravenscar Thubald. There is only ever one guildmaster now, which is currently Nine Fingers Keen, her real name being Astel Keen. Her nickname has been aptly given after a one-eyed elf kidnapped her as a girl and cut off one of her fingers in an attempt to extort Keen's family. Beneath Keen there are guild kingpins that each have their own subordinates. The kingpins do not rule as open lords of these districts. Baldur's Gate still has a legitimate government, albeit it is peppered with corrupt nobles and politicians. There are kingpins that rule more openly than others, and corruption isn't quite at the level where the guild and its operatives could function openly, and in many instances the Flaming Fist and the Watch are still capable of coming down hard on members of the guild. The biggest difference between the Watch and the Fist is that the Fist are largely soldiers tasked with maintaining the peace. They were capable of fighting domestic and foreign threats, the type of men and women that you'd want defending the city against, say, a marauding army led by evil mind flayers, whereas the Watch were closer to a constabulary. However, they only served the rich, and therefore the city lacked guards that had a proper duty of care over the citizens proper. Who was there to look out for the little guy? Well, the Fist in theory, but it rarely worked that way. Now, this isn't really a Robin Hood type story. The Guild is a blight upon the city in many ways, as they are responsible for all manner of heinous crimes, the blackmailing and corruption of politicians, and crime against average citizens. But there are those who exist in the organisation that try to better the lives of individual citizens. Rilsa Rael was one of these. As a girl, she witnessed her father hung by Flaming Fist mercenaries, and so to support Rael, her mother became a courtesan of a rich Patriarch. When the wife of this Patriarch found out about their tryst, she had Rael's mother locked in the sea tower of Baldur, where she eventually died. The wealthy Patriarch, on the other hand, faced no punishment. It was these events that shaped Rael's view of the city, particularly her view of the Fist and the city's leaders. She eventually joined a gang in Norrchapel and rose up the ranks of the Guild, becoming a bodyguard for Nine Fingers Keene, eventually becoming the kingpin of Little Kalimshan in the outer city. Often seen to be the heir to the Guild, she sympathises greatly with the poor and has many egalitarian principles. However, she is just one of many kingpins and contrasts greatly with the others in the Guild. For example, Rakath Glitterbeard, the kingpin of the Steeps, and also the owner of the Counting House, a bank responsible for storing many valuable items belonging to the nobles and merchants of the city. Now, as a side operation, Rakath controls many of the loan sharks and kneecappers who prey on the city's poor with their predatory loans. There is also Goblin Bainey, who despite the name is a polished looking human with a ferocious ego, wild rages, and a propensity for biting off the fingers of those who disappoint him. He is the kingpin of the Bloomridge district. All of these kingpins answer to Nine Fingers, a patient, calculating and ruthless woman who goes to great lengths to keep control of the city and to stop the spilling of blood unnecessarily. She's no revolutionary and doesn't want an open confrontation with the Fist, the Watch or the Patriarchs, and uses her own personal wealth every month to ensure that the relevant officers and politicians are paid. Ultimately, Nine Fingers lacks the egalitarianism of Rilsa and was motivated primarily by the Guild's profit margins, and anyone who actually thinks Nine Fingers is somehow a hero of the working class know that in Descent into Avernus the following is written. Keene has become increasingly intolerant of the populist tide turning against her organisation. While the occasional rabble-rouser has always impeded criminal business, the rise of organised crews and vigilantes is interfering with guild operations. After a carefully coordinated attack on a Patriarch's estate fell to pieces when a vigilante clumsily alerted the estate guards, Keene declared open season on do-gooders of all stripes. Now, the Guild's crimes depended on where in the city they were operating. For example, in the lower city, which is richer than the outer city where Little Kalimshan is, the locals here have enough money to make burglary and protection schemes worthwhile. Gambling dens, animal fights, races and brawling tournaments were also common. However, in the upper city, the Guild engaged in burglary, but also extortion, blackmail and confidence games. Patriarchs might even hire guild members to gain or plant information about their rivals. The upper city was particularly difficult to infiltrate at night due to the Watch enforcing a curfew to lower city residents. However, this was often circumvented by the Guild, bribing certain officers and using a password to identify themselves as Guild members. So even though the Guild was responsible for a large amount of the city's crime and corruption, they did usually try to stay away from overt violence, but there were other organisations and forces responsible for a far more sinister side to the crime that affected Baldur's Gate.
They're just living their mortal dream. When you're a bloodthirsty god of murder, retreating off to the Grey Havens is no good. You want to be in the mortal world, feasting on blood. So the Dead Three now find themselves in that sort of position where they are in the mortal world and they're enacting their master plan, which perhaps, if you play this game, you'll find out.
meaning that here the Dead Three are likely active. The cultists reflect their gods, or quasi-gods, given that the Dead Three lost much of their power. Bane's cultists seek to rule through martial strength and intimidation. Baal's cultists emulate their god by committing horrific and brutal killings. And Merkel's followers seek to master the necromantic arts and are fascinated with the dead. In Descent into Avernus, Dead Three cultists are murdering citizens of Baldur's Gate across the city, and they are being funded by the Van Tamper family. The matriarch of the Van Tamper family is Thalamra, a duke who wishes to destabilize the city so that she can replace Ravengard as the Grand Duke. She's a devil worshipper, albeit this secret is kept from the public. The guild has very little control over these types of people. Dead Three cultists and devil worshippers aren't influenced by money or blackmail. Their loyalty is linked to something that cannot really be tamed. Worship of the Dead Three is now bleeding into every part of society in Baldur's Gate. There is something incredibly sinister and dark shrouding the city, and the crime that they commit and the level of their infiltration should cause a great deal of concern for the citizens that live there. In Descent into Avernus, you will likely defeat the Dead Three cultists in the bathhouse, and then go on to expose Thalmara as a devil worshipper before moving on to Elturel. But the Dead Three cultists had also infiltrated Hamhock's slaughterhouse, where Pasque Enrial, the cult's mastermind, resides, and there is no specific plot thread where the players will target it. The slaughterhouse is the perfect place to hide the carnage the cultists are bringing down upon the city. But it's not just the slaughterhouse. Cultists have their eyes on Eomain House, a noble manor in the upper city that hosts almost sadistic masked parties, where Nicene Eomain invites social climbers from the lower city to her manor, and whom after dark cannot leave the house because of the curfew. She then makes cruel sport out of them with her upper city guests until they can escape at daybreak. Bane's cultists are said to see Nicene as a talent worth cultivating. In other parts of the city, like the Cliffside Cemetery, necromancers seek to conjure secrets from the wealthy dead. Gang leaders and mercenaries pay homage to Bane, and assassins or those who benefit from someone's violent death may pay their respects to Baal. Of course, Baal has a particularly strong link to the city. He was reincarnated here, there is an ancient temple to Baal underneath the city, and Torlin Silvershield, a noble in the city, even became a chosen of the newly resurrected Baal, attempting to blow up the Parliament of Peers only 10 years prior. So between the guild and the Dead Three cultists, Baldur's Gate is a city with a rotten heart, with little good left within, that is slowly being gnawed at by a creeping and deadly corruption.